Thanks for listening to the Forest Ramble Podcast. Please subscribe and leave a review on your podcast provider, as this helps other Forest supporters find our content. Now on with the pod. A new season tends to bring plenty of optimism for football fans, or at least it does until the first match is over. Welcome to a new season of Rich Ferraro's Forest Ramble. I'm joined here today by, first of all, Baz, say hello.
Hiya.
We have Steven Toplis, hello.
Hello.
And we have the Maradona of the Midlands, hello.
Bonjour.
Hi. Right, okay, so naturally enough, everyone goes into the new season full of hope and optimism, and I think for most Forest supporters, certainly the ones who went to the matches against Palace and Real Sociedad, there's a good sense of optimism. And I think it's fair to say that a lot of people felt their bubble had been burst slightly after yesterday's defeat to West Brom. The headlines are, it was Forest's first defeat on an opening day at home for something like 35 years. And then the other headline, of course, is Aro Mujic making his debut in goal for Forest. And, let's just say it could have gone better. Stephen, what do you think was the defining factor of the match that meant that West Brom came away with the points?
Forest scoring when they did. Sounds like a strange thing to say, but
yes, it does.
Forest getting the goal. Well, they were fantastic first 10 minutes. Forest, they were all over West Brom, swarmed them, didn't give them any opportunity to play. They get the goal, the fans are up, and you think, okay, here we go. The season's started now. And then as soon as that goal went in, Forest just seemed to sit back. Maybe it woke West Brom up a little bit, and they started playing. And within 5 minutes, the scores were level. And it was a quick shot from Carl Edwards that probably caught out Mujic in goal. But I think the keeper should have done a bit more with it to keep the ball out. Yeah. And it was just that once that goal went in, it only looked like there was one team that was going to win it, and that was West Brom.
Okay, we'll definitely talk about Mujic a little bit more. Baz, just thinking about, you were of the opinion that Forest looked a bit lightweight.
Yeah, there was a few things that concerned me a bit, but the main thing I thought is, after we went ahead, we treated it like the Palace game. It was like a pre-season friendly. There was no urgency to our play whatsoever. It was like, and West Brom's midfield completely and utterly dominated. Ben Watson was totally overrun, and that was because we weren't making ourselves available. We weren't moving. We weren't really putting any effort in until the last sort of 20 minutes or so, and that was kind of concerning. And it felt like this was a side that didn't understand what the Championship was about.
Okay, Maradona the Midlands, you were slightly less pessimistic than that.
Yeah, I mean, the first 10 minutes, I think we took West Brom by surprise. We came out with a very attacking lineup with Watson being really the only sitting midfielder. It was like a 4-1-4-1 formation with Semedo, Silva, Lolly, and Doma all pushing up and getting really close to Lewis Graben. So I think that took West Brom by surprise. We could have gone ahead just before we scored. In fact, Jack Robinson had a good chance where he probably should have scored. And we were sort of overwhelming them there. They didn't really know what to do. But after the goal, I saw Townsend and Romain Sawyer sort of talking to each other and saying, look, we've got to sort this out. And they just dropped back a little bit and filled in the spaces. I think it was a very odd formation for a Championship type side to go out with, to be so attacking. And it worked. It worked. We've looked a lot more creative than we have done in a long time, and looked like we could score at will.
Is that a French thing?
Maybe.
I think because Montagnier, his teams looked best when they were on the front foot.
Yeah, I mean, in European football in general, there is less of an emphasis on being defensive. Especially I've seen a lot of German football down the years and French football as well. There's not so much of a fear factor of losing a goal. But it left Watson very much exposed, as Baz said. He was there's a big gap between our four in midfield and then Watson behind him, which they, with their know-how and their ability And let's not forget this, they've got good players. Townsend, you're not going to get many better players than him. Not Townsend, Livermore. Jake Livermore, sorry. You're not going to get many better players than him in the Championship.
And we were making the point, weren't we, that Thiago Silva, that'll have been the first time in his life he'll have come up against a big, strong, athletic, burly midfielder like Livermore who takes no prisoners.
Exactly.
And you could see Thiago Silva was pretty subdued all match once those first kind of times that he was knocked off the ball. Yeah, and looking up at the ref pleadingly and not going to get anything.
It was a little bit men against boys. There was a time when Semedo was trying to get into the box and get around Townsend, and he was never going to do it. Townsend just stood there like a brick wall, and he was Semedo was like looking for a penalty, but it was never a penalty. And it's just that knowledge and that ability and that strength of just those two big guys in there sort of nullified our attacking.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the points that we were making, wasn't it, Baz? In that, you've got a manager who's new to the Championship, and we've got a significant number of players who are new to the Championship. The ones that we've already mentioned, Mujic, Semedo, and Thiago Silva. And I think that showed, didn't it?
Absolutely. And what worried me a little bit, I mean, there's a few things that worried me, but one of the things that was there was actually West Brom aren't that big and that physical a side. Not really. If you imagine that side playing like that against Cardiff, we're going to get completely demolished because I know lots of the fans were complaining, saying we weren't getting anything off the referee, but actually all that was happening was our players were bouncing off theirs because we weren't expecting a physical contest, and it wasn't actually very physical. It was we weren't ready for it, we weren't prepared, but that's how people play at the moment. That's a little bit worrying.
That's interesting actually, because from where I sat, I thought the referee had a really good match and was happy to let things flow as much as possible. And the one yellow card he issued was against Romain Sawyers, and that was for a long-running feud between him and Rafa Mir, where the ref actually did a very good job of keeping Mir calm, letting Sawyers do whatever he needed to, and then saying, "You can't say I didn't warn you," and then giving him the yellow card.
Yeah, they weren't dirty at all, West Brom.
Not at all.
They were just a professional, strong team. And just once they sort of figured out what Forest were doing, they just switched it around a little bit tactically to exploit that big gap between the defence and the midfield.
I would dispute that idea that West Brom weren't physical. I think they were physical as you'd expect, if you see what I mean. So they had.
I wouldn't put them in the bracket of Cardiff. Though. That's a physical side. You're going to come off that pitch bruised after playing Cardiff, but after playing West Brom, then our players shouldn't have felt bruised and battered, but they probably do.
Yeah. It wasn't like a game against a land of the Giants type team.
No, it wasn't. And I think Maradona Midlands, you came across something there as well, which you said, which is that two things that you said that really struck me. One is that idea about West Brom really being able to get between our lines, and you could see that there were big gaps between the defence. I actually thought that Worrell and Dawson did a very good job at centre half, but with Watson trying to protect them, Watson was all there was. The fullbacks weren't quite in position, and there was nothing coming from Semedo and Thiago Silva. And then the other thing is just that West Brom were much, much better off the ball than Forest were. Stephen, I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that.
Of the Forest midfielders, I think Semedo was the one who put himself across the best. He looked a bit more competitive, like he was ready to stand up to West Brom and try and have that bit of physicality into the midfield, but he couldn't do it on his own. And he had his moments where he looked good, but it was the whole team performance just didn't back that up. And I don't blame Watson for anything that happened in the game. I think he just wasn't given enough support, and you're asking a lot of him to link defence and midfield and attack, to defend as well, and then to pass the ball and use the ball wisely. It was a lot for him to do.
I think he played well, Watson did. It's just, I think, just the know-how of West Brom. They saw that Matty Cash wasn't that comfortable at right back, and they overloaded that side. Gibbs was forward at every opportunity as well.
And we also noticed that with the switch of the wingers, it was after that first goal, they switched. Lamouchi switched the wingers because Adoma wasn't able to protect Cash. and then it also meant that Lolly was subdued because West Brom were targeting the right back area as well. But the trouble is that Watson was having to do a lot of work. I agree. I thought actually I would have given Watson the Forest man of the match rather than Semedo. Semedo caught the eye, but in terms of the bread and butter stuff that kept Forest in with a fighting chance, I thought it was Watson who was doing that work.
And having sort of criticised Forest and praised West Brom, if we hadn't conceded 2 ridiculous goals, we probably could have won it. I mean, West Brom only really created one more chance from open play for the rest of the game, so there's no point being too down on it. It's just, yes, they did us, but...
And Slaven Bilic said that as well, didn't he? He said that, he wasn't happy because he didn't feel that West Brom created enough going forward. But I think in that sense, West Brom could have done, and they will do when the season gets going. But at the same time, and it's worth pointing out, their number 7, Kravinovic, was absolutely excellent. I mean, they gave the official man of the match to their young right back, Nathan Ferguson. But I think Kravinovic, everything that West Brom did that was good.
He was running the game at times,
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So it was not the result we wanted. I don't think we necessarily need to be so despondent because on the usual grounds after the first game, 45 games to go, depends on how we learn from it. Also worth pointing out that Sabri Lamouchi made the right noises in his post-match interview, Stephen.
He did, yeah. He was thoughtful in his analysis of the game.
He didn't just put it down to a freak goal.
No,
which is what we all feared, I think.
Yeah, that was the worry that it would just be all on that freak goal, and that would mask anything else that was going on in the game. No, Lamouchi spoke well, and he said the right things, and that you can just see from his perspective on the game that he's looking for the right areas, and he's looking at ways that we can now learn from this game and improve over the next few.
Stephen, I see that you have a well catalogued list there of transfers in and out that Forest have made over the summer, and it has been one of the busier transfer windows for the Reds, at least since Aitor Karanka was in charge anyway. Mm-hmm. We've had players coming in, but just as importantly, we've had players leaving. Talk us through the high-profile players who aren't here anymore.
I think the most high-profile is Ben Osborne, who has gone to Sheffield United. It's undisclosed, but we think it's around about 3.5 million plus some add-ons, which for a player in the final 12 months of his contract is not bad business.
I think everyone's happy, really, aren't they?
Yeah, I think so. I think he needed a move for his own career. I think he's becoming...
And you can't begrudge a player a move to the Premier League.
No, and decent money for Forest.
And there's a small but significant proportion of Forest supporters who will be delighted that Benny's leaving the club.
Yeah. I think everybody wins in this situation.
Yeah, okay.
It's a good move for him, and I think Chris Wilder, when you look at the performances he gets out of players who have been written off, people like David McGoldrick, Billy Sharp to a degree, he's turned them into championship-winning players. So if you look at Osborne, what you can do with Osborne in the Premier League, you might well turn him into a solid. The other thing is that
I think that Chris Wilder, it goes back to the stuff that we've discussed in the past. Chris Wilder has got this brilliant ability to make sure that every single player on the pitch knows exactly what their job is. And I think sometimes, by virtue of having been a utility player, Benny's had to fill different gaps. So actually that sense of direction in a more stable club where the manager isn't as likely to change every 6 months, hopefully will do him a lot of good in terms of his own development. And I'm pretty confident he can actually step up a level from where he is. So good luck to him. Other players who've moved on, I think in terms of significant transfers, I would add in Hilal Sudani and Karim Ansarifard to being significant outgoings, mainly because they were close to the first team, but also because of the fact that they were probably on decent wages and we've probably got decent fees for them. Would you agree, Stephen?
I would, yeah. Sudani's gone to Olympiacos, so I would imagine that there's something in that deal where, Forest benefit from a decent fee. And Ansarifard has gone to Al Salia in Qatar. So yes, they've both moved on. I'm more disappointed with Ansarifard leaving because I think he had plenty to offer. So that for me was a bit of a shame, especially when you look at the options currently available, with just Rafa Mir and Lewis Grabban as out-and-out strikers. So I think having Ansarifard in there would have strengthened us a bit. Especially
as Ansarifard, I think does have that ability to play in the number 9 role, and as you'll hear later, we sort of discuss about how Lewis Grabban isn't really comfortable playing as that sort of leading the line type striker. It's almost like we need one of those players like who was that lad who played for Sunderland and Ipswich back in the Championship? Big Irish lad, Daryl Murphy. That's it. A player like that could be quite useful to Forest at the moment.
He could. And while we're on the subject of strikers out, Tyler Walker has joined Lincoln on loan for the season.
Bit of a surprise.
Well, it was in the sense that it looks like we might have to be playing him because of the lack of options. But with Rafa Mir coming in, that seems to have freed up Walker to move on.
Maradona on the Midlands?
Yeah, it was a bit of a surprise considering how much he'd been involved in pre-season.
And I would also say that Tyler has, from, 4 years ago, we saw him make his debut as like this really spindly teenager. And we thought, well, he's never going to make it as a centre forward. And we saw him play out on the left and the right as well. But over the last season, he seems to have, obviously you get bigger and stronger as you get older. And he has come from a boy to a man. But also I think that he is somebody who does seem to have got the attributes to maybe be a number 9 or play in the kind of role that Rafa Mir can play, where he's sort of able to be quite direct and give defenders something to think about. So I don't know if you have any kind of...
I think he would have been a useful squad player, but maybe he realised that's all he would have been, and so when the option came to play regular football at a level higher than he was last season, I guess it was very tempting for him. From the perspective of the club, I guess they would have wanted to keep him, but unless they know they're going to get somebody else in between now and Thursday. So.
Yeah. And the other thing I'll say about Tyler is that again, without kind of wishing to have the same old conversation again about social media, but obviously quite a few naysayers saying Tyler's not good enough. But the way I see it is if Forest had been linked in the transfer market with a young striker who scored 20 plus goals in League Two last season and saying, oh yeah, we could sign him for, £1 million, then if he wasn't already at the club, then most fans, I think, would say, yeah, that sounds like a signing with lots of promise. So I don't really understand the naysayers on this, and I am a bit surprised to see him move on.
Yeah, but that's the nature of Twitter these days. It's you get a lot of naysayers for everything.
It's the nature of football fans all the time, actually.
They're all experts, aren't they?
It's always been the nature of football fans, but in the past you would have maybe got one person phoning up a phone in on Radio Nottingham once every couple of weeks saying it. Now you sort of get a torrent of it all at the same time, and it creates a story where there isn't one. It's a similar sort of situation that happened with Ben Osborne. There's been plenty of players in the past who have not been fans' favourites, and people have criticised.
The other thing about, again, don't want to really kind of rehash the conversations we've had in the past, but the thing with Ben Osborne is that his dad basically shouting back at fans on Twitter, which I don't think paints anyone in a good light, really. Poor old Benny's caught in the middle there. Going back to transfers out, the other ones, I suppose, aren't so surprising. Players who probably weren't going to play, who have now gone on to pastures new, and fair play to them.
Yeah, Taxidis, who was a Karanka signing, never really did a great deal.
Didn't even make a first-team appearance, did he?
I think
maybe one as a sub or something
like that. Came off the bench a few times, but never got himself in the team regularly. Stephen Henderson, Crystal Palace on a free. That was a bit of a surprise. I suppose he's done well to get a Premier League move, even if he is going to be a backup keeper.
Gone from being fourth choice in the Championship to being third choice in the Premier League.
Yeah, so a bit of an odd one, but he's a player who's now off the books who wasn't going to play. And then Apostolos Velios has gone to Atromitos in Greece, and that is a free transfer as well. So another player who was brought in by a different manager, who had his moments, but never really managed to to convince in a Forest shirt. So,
and as you'd mentioned Lincoln earlier, of course, George Grant has moved to Lincoln on a permanent deal. We speculated, didn't we, at the end of last season that George probably wasn't going to make it at Forest, and so that seemed like a good move for him, doesn't it?
Yeah, his time at Forest had come to an end a while ago. He was never going to get into the team.
I mean, he's 25 years old now. Yeah. I think a move to League One, playing for managers like the Cowleys, getting regular football, I think he can do a decent job there. It probably, maybe the Championship was maybe one level too high for him, potentially. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about some of the players coming in. Now, we know about the players who were in the squad yesterday. Amiobi, Adoma, Mujic, Thiago Silva, and we also had and Semedo, and we also had on the bench, we had Yuri Ribeiro and Rafa Mir. The other one that we haven't mentioned is the most recent acquisition, Samba Sow?
Samba Sow.
Okay, who's a Malian international midfielder, apparently big, strong. I don't know much about his style of play. I mean, Semedo, what I liked about him, he was almost like a bit of a throwback to the old-fashioned box-to-box midfielder. What do you know about Samba?
It seems that Samba is a slightly more defensive midfielder, so I see him playing where Watson played against West Brom. But I think he's got a bit more mobility, and he's bigger and he's stronger than Watson as well. So he looks like the sort of player who's going to get stuck in and be combative and just do a bit of that dirty work at the base of the midfield. So I'd be interested to see if he gets a go against Leeds, or certainly in the game against Fleetwood in the Carabao Cup.
And we're assuming he wasn't in the squad against West Brom just because he has arrived so recently. I mean, you were pointing out, weren't you, Maradona, the Midlands, during the match, it's like, it's a long way from Moscow. Yeah. So he probably needs a few days to acclimatise, get himself settled in. There's actually a time difference and a climate difference as well. So we'll see what happens with that. Be interesting, because I think with that, we'll discuss in a bit that Watson, according to what we've seen in pre-season and what we saw against West Brom, that's going to be an important role in the team. So if Samba's going to play in that role, or potentially play in that role, then that could be something that's going to catch our eye again in the future. And then the other one that's very much speculation at the moment, I mean, we're talking about speculation. Everyone's saying, well, we need a right back and we probably could do with another striker. But the one that's been kind of almost talked about in more definite terms is a £3 million goalkeeper, also called Samba, who is potentially going to be signed from the French leagues. What do we know about him, Bryce Samba?
Absolutely nothing. I'm afraid, from me.
So I think what that also tells us is that, and in fairness, Radio Nottingham asked Lamouchi about it in the interview. Pantilimon and Steele are almost certainly on their way. I mean, it was telling that Jordan Smith was on the bench.
Yep.
So it suggests that the two senior keepers are going. Mujic is going to get competition, maybe from a new guy. The other thing about having Smith on the bench is, of course, Pantilimon, his distribution isn't good. Steele is more of an old-fashioned keeper. So the fact that Smith was on the bench suggests that, in terms of having the kind of the sweeper keeper style, that Lamouchi has more faith in Smith to kind of adapt to that rather than the two senior keepers.
Yes, interesting, given that the criticism that Smith used to get for his distribution and his movement of the ball when he was playing it out, but then he's a younger keeper, he's going to learn and improve. And
also, let's be honest, okay, it's not that Smith's distribution was terrible, it's also that he was trying to pass it out to Matt Mills. And, we've got, when you've got Michael Dawson and Joe Worrell and Toby Figueiredo and Alex Milosevic as the centre halves who are creating space, they're all much more comfortable on the ball, all much more able to kind of bring the ball out. So it's a different situation, isn't it?
Yeah, and with the Bryce Samba link, what we know about him is that he plays for Cannes in France, and he used to play for Marseille. He's 25, so he's got plenty of time to.
Yep.
He's not in his peak.
Young for a keeper.
Yeah, young for a keeper. He's not anywhere near his peak his peak years yet. They were relegated last season from League and Can, but he played 38 times for them. Mm-hmm. The line is that Lamouchi has been seduced by the explosiveness and solidity of Samba on his goalkeeper line. I mean, I'm reading that
I wonder
from Soccerlink.
I wonder if that would have been the headline if Lamouche wasn't French and Samba wasn't playing in the French league. I think it's very easy to say to use romance language there. But, I mean, the thing is that, I mean, we discussed a little bit about Mujic. Clearly Mujic is going to have a lot to learn. I think it's worth reminding ourselves that Mujic is incredibly young for a goalkeeper, and he will only get better. I mean, the thing is, if ever you need to learn, then you need... as a keeper, then it's usually a baptism of fire, isn't it? Because there's nowhere to hide when you concede a goal like that first one you conceded.
Yeah, I don't know if we can afford to give him that opportunity to learn. If we're gonna launch a promotion push, I mean, just before we conceded that goal, I turned to you and said he's going to cost us a load of goals this season but I didn't necessarily mean through just not letting shots go straight through him. I meant just sort of passing out from the back. We're bound to make a few mistakes during the course of the season, but I saw when he played against Olympiacos and even against Real Sociedad, he sort of had a bit of rush of blood to the head in that game as well. Yeah, it just doesn't inspire confidence, and he looks weak on crosses and not a brilliant shot stopper. I don't think he's as good a keeper as Pantilimon in any other way apart from his distribution.
Well, I think that all the keepers we've got at the club at the moment are prone to a howler of one type or another. And so it'd be interesting to know that if Samba does come in as a goalkeeper, is he somebody who's a bit more composed and a bit more kind of... a bit more able to keep his head? Because, like you say, Mujic, we've seen, even in the very little we've seen evidence that he is going to be prone to a little rush of blood to the head. He looks a little bit flappy on crosses, high balls into the box. Now, as we were discussing, there's a fine line when there's a high ball into the box between, wow, the keeper did well there, and oh my God, the keeper's completely screwed it up. And one of the corners that came in, it's like, we were all going, oh no, and then he got fingertips to it, which actually tipped it round for another corner. And so it turned out being, rather than being an absolute disaster, being, you know what, he did well there. Yeah. So it's fine lines.
And I wouldn't blame him for the West Brom second goal either. I think it was just a lucky cross that managed to find the very top corner of the net. The cross shouldn't have been allowed to come in the first place, so I wouldn't be putting too much criticism on Mujic for that. It was just a bit of an unlucky goal to concede.
Okay, and we shall talk tactics in just a minute.
The Forest Ramble sketch by Jeremy Davies. Summer football. In years gone by, that meant a World Cup or European Championship, and the inestimable agony of watching England blow a chance at success on the international stage, whether through tragedy like Italia 90, or like losing to Iceland in Euro 2016, genuine tragicomedy. Which brings us to Aro Mujic's display against West Brom. These days, of course, summer football means the start of the new football season, and Nottingham Forest's latest attempt to get into the top flight for the first time this millennium. I mean, seriously, has anyone even been on their summer holidays yet? It's a little unfair that footballers who, even at championship level, earn more than most of us, get to book their summer holidays while the kids are still at school, thereby getting access to all the best deals. Still, it's a short career, as we all know, and as Mujic seemed determined to prove on his debut for the club. He isn't the first goalkeeper to have a nightmare debut. Other custodians to have started on the wrong foot include ex-internationals Tim Flowers, who let in 4 on his first appearance for Stockport in 2001, and Andy Gorham, whose brief second spell at Oldham began by shipping 7 to Cardiff. And spare a thought for Mike Salmon, whose debut for Oxford also saw him let in 7, and was enough for him to be voted the club's worst ever player. After 20 years of hurt outside the top division, Forest have surely got enough candidates for that dubious honour that Mujic doesn't have to worry quite yet. If the second goal was pure slapstick, missing only Muric's anguished inner monologue of, is it a bird? Is it a cross? No, it's a miss-hit that's going to go right over my head and hit the top corner, then the first goal was almost heartwarming in the way it showed these highly trained, ultra-competitive athletes offering each other such encouragement. The Forest defenders, clearly determined to keep their shape, watched admiringly as the ball zipped across the field in front of them. Kyle Edwards then sold them a dummy so blatant Boris Johnson's considering offering it Chris Grayling's old job before Mujic applied his very own finishing touch. Still, a good debut is no guarantee of future success. Just ask Morecambe keeper Barry Roach, who made his Forest debut in 2000 against Crystal Palace after Dave Besson had been sent off, and saved a penalty with his very first touch. Poor Barry only made 10 appearances for the club after conceding a bizarre goal at Derby when the ball deflected off a coffee cup that had blown onto the pitch. It is, as we all know, a marathon, not a sprint, and the key thing in a marathon is not to start too strong. So with that in mind, all going to plan for Forest so far.
In pre-season and in the match against West Brom, we saw an indication of what Sabri Lamouchi wants to do tactically. What was interesting in the matches against Palace and Sociedad is that we played with more or less the same personnel, but with different formations and tactics, and the difference is the role that Alfa Semedo was playing. So against Palace and against West Brom, Ben Watson was sitting very deep. He was the one who was almost dropping between the centre-halves, almost as like an auxiliary defender at times, and being, directing traffic, and Semedo was playing more as a box-to-box. Against Sociedad, Semedo was playing almost as a defensive midfielder alongside Watson, which enabled Thiago Silva to play in a more of an old-fashioned number 10 role. I think that there's not just significance to that in terms of the midfield, but I think that could be significant in terms of the fullbacks. Maradona, the Midlands, what do you think about the idea of the gap between the defence, the midfield, and the attack that we've alluded to?
It's not a new problem. We've had it sort of for a few years now, where we can be good at defending or we're good at attacking. We've always struggled to sort of link the three, and there's always been gaps between the three areas. Semedo, I think, could be a pivotal player in solving that, because I've not seen a player sort of drive forward like that in a Forest shirt in a long time, and have the ability to be that physical presence.
It's just legs, isn't it? It's like in the Palace match, there was one time when I think Andros Townsend was sprinting past him, and he just increased his stride pattern by about 2 inches and just cantered forward and beat him to the ball.
Yeah, I think it worked really well for that first 10 minutes against West Brom, when all of them were going forward, and it created a lot of chances to cause havoc in the West Brom defence. But long term, I think he's going to have to sit alongside the defending midfielder and then break from there, a bit more like he was doing in the second half. That's, I think.
But he has got the capability of being that box-to-box player.
He has. He's got pace. He's got strength. He's got power. He's got physical presence. So he could be very important for us in that respect, linking the defence through midfield up to attack.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but then the big... Right, I mean, we saw this again in both the pre-season friendlies at home and against West Brom, which is there's a big gap between the midfield and Lewis Graben, and Graben's having to do a lot of donkey work with very little reward and sort of... I think there's going to have to be a lot of change in terms of, for the wingers. The wingers are playing more out wide than they were under the last couple of managers. Stephen, is that something that concerns you?
It is a little bit. When you look at the switch yesterday, when we had Adoma on the right, Lolly on the left, there wasn't really any opportunity for either of them to cut inside and support Graben that way. We were relying a little bit on getting the ball out wide and putting crosses in, which is fine, but I don't think it really suits Graben's game to be playing that way. So
I'm not sure I agree.
I disagree. I think he'll thrive on the crosses, and it was really refreshing to see so many crosses coming in.
And particularly, I have to say, in pre-season, I'd been sceptical over the summer about signing Adoma as a player who is probably on big wages, who has kind of been a club-to-club man and is the wrong side of 30. And then in pre-season, I was like, you know what? I take it back. I was wrong. I have to say, yesterday, I was quite sceptical. I thought that for a winger of his experience to not have the ability to track back, I thought in this division is pretty criminal. But I temper that with the fact that he put in 2 absolutely amazing crosses, the likes of which we haven't seen at the City Ground for quite some time.
We were better than last season at getting players around grabbing. I think there was a sign of improvement there. It's just West Brom. When you go into a football match and you're going to play it as a pure football match, we're going to play football against you and not a tactical, we're going to stop you from playing. You've got to be better than the other team. But unfortunately, West Brom had better players. They had better players in those positions.
Is that just because in those key positions they had more experience? So, like, they had... in defence, they had Bartley and Gibbs, who've got loads and loads of games, Premier League experience. In midfield, they had Livermore, and then
Sawyers as well.
Yeah, and Sawyers. I mean, Sawyers is a great signing.
And just technique-wise, well, I mean, for all their good points, Lolly, Cash aren't good passers of the ball. This is something we sort of suffered with last season. They're good at running with it. They're good at getting some goals, but they're not naturally good passers of the ball, sort of pinging it around. What West Brom were doing was the ball's coming into a midfielder and just ping it off around the corner, and every single time, and that set off their fullbacks.
Yeah, and our fullbacks were really struggling yesterday.
Yeah.
I mean, Jack Robinson had one of the least comfortable games I've seen him have at left back for Forest.
Yeah, and I mean, that's okay if you've got better players than the other team. That's fine, you can do that, and you can come out winning 2-1, 3-2, whatever. When you're playing against better players, you have to have some sort of tactical base to where you say, well, okay, we're going to stop you from using your best points.
And you made the point that you thought that Forest got found out pretty quickly. Like once West Brom after Forest scored that goal, whether it's too early or not, Stephen, but after Forest scored that goal, you thought that West Brom were able to just adjust their tactics.
Yeah, and it's not maybe a surprise because they've got a very good manager.
Yeah,
Slaven Bilic is an experienced manager, and okay, West Brom have lost some players from last season. Maybe they're a bit weaker in terms of that, but they've
certainly up front. Yeah, I think that they're going to need to get. Zohore is their only recognised centre forward now.
Yeah, but they've maybe improved from a manager point of view. So
yeah.
I wouldn't read too much into that. So not getting people around grabbing. It's just they were better than us with the passing. I think when Carvalho's back in the team, that will improve.
Yeah,
and the players themselves will learn as time goes on how to play in the Championship and how to play with each other. And I'm not too despondent about it.
Okay, we do need a proper right back though, don't we? Because Matty Cash did actually pretty well, and I think it's very easy to attach blame to him for that first goal because he got turned inside out. But I've seen many more experienced right backs get turned inside out like that, and I think the secret is that he's going to need some support, and Watson was pulling to the right quite a lot to try and support him as the game went on. But as I say, the big problem was when the winger wasn't dropping back. And if you're going to be playing in a sort of a 4-1-4-1 type formation like Forest were, I think the wingers are going to have to really do some tracking.
They will do, yeah. And if you look at the game itself, West Brom targeted Cash because they saw him as not a proper right back, which he isn't. And he's being asked to play there because we don't have Derricka available. He's out now for a couple of months.
More than that.
Well, probably more.
Probably
than
the season.
Yeah, ruptured ACL, which is a real shame for him. So we need an out and out right back to come in, because I look at Cash and I compare him to Ben Osborne, because I think when Ben Osborne was playing at left back, opposition players targeted him because he was seen as a weak link and a player who isn't a natural left back. Cash is going to be the same now on the right hand side. And it's Jayden Richardson. I'd like to see him play, and by all accounts, Lamouchi rates him. But is it going to be too much to throw him in now and expect him to put in commanding?
I think it would have been a baptism of fire to put him in against. I mean, I don't know much about West Brom's left winger. I mean, obviously he scored a goal, but also Kieran Gibbs was bombing forward at every opportunity, and I think that would have been a real baptism of fire.
I think against weaker teams, the playing Cash at right back will actually help us a lot, because when
with
teams,
the goal we scored,
when teams come and sit back and just say, all right, break us down, then having that extra player in an attacking position from a defensive position who's got attacking capabilities will actually help Forest give a little bit more width and a bit more attacking threat. It's just against stronger teams. I mean, I'd be really wary about going in with him at Leeds next week. I'm a bit worried about that game.
Well, we'll have to see if we sign a right back in the next few days, won't we?
Yeah.
I hear that Chris Gunter is available. Perhaps we could spend the Gunter money on him. So I think that is something that's going to be, it is a priority area, isn't it?
Yeah, between now and Thursday, when the deadline comes along, hopefully Forest will have addressed that, and the right back and striker positions in particular will have been sorted.
Okay. Any other areas that you think are particularly, require attention, shall we say?
There's a third striker maybe, as he seems to have frozen out Daryl Murphy now.
Yeah.
So.
And I think actually we talked about transfers. I think just as important to the players who are still at the club and we expect to see leaving, and if they don't leave, we expect them to not necessarily play for Forest again. So we've already talked about Pantilimon and Steele. We need to mention Guedioura. We need to mention Murphy. There's just 3 or 4 players who are knocking about where Lamouchi has said, you know what, off you go, find a new club. And bottom line is, in those situations, what makes it difficult for a club is it's down to the player, because naturally they're not necessarily going to want to take a cut in wages.
But by the sounds of it, Guedioura seems to have an offer from
Q8.
Q8, yeah. So he's desperate to go for some of that tax-free money.
Yeah. And with Murphy, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because he's the archetypal good, honest professional, etc., etc. But
it's been harsh on Murphy. I think maybe that's more to do with his wages. Is the want to get him off as a professional. He'll come in sporadically and do a good job for you. I remember against Leeds in the home game last season, he was immense. Okay, he doesn't do it week in, week out.
What? Even yesterday, a lot of that running around that Graben was having to do, that's exactly the kind of thing that Murphy would have been good at. And that does bring us back to that idea that you mentioned, Stephen, about Ansarifard. It's like, it seems odd to jettison both of those at the same time. So I have to hope that there is another forward lined up.
Yeah.
What are your first impressions, Baz, of the new gaffer now that we've seen a couple of friendly matches? We've seen the first proper match, as it were. Has he created a good impression with you?
I think so, yeah. I like what he's trying to do. It's whether we can actually get there and do it in time is the issue after the first game of the season. I like the fact that we are trying to mix it up. We're playing quite attacking style, which is really nice. We're playing on the ball on the deck as much as possible, but we're not afraid to switch it. I'm slightly concerned at the playing the ball out from the keeper, because all West Brom did was basically just plant 3 people right up on the keeper, and it seemed to leave us with no ideas for a little bit. But apart from that, I'm quite kind of impressed with the way we're trying to play. It's whether we can get to play in that way is the issue.
Okay. Maradona Midlands, what were your thoughts?
As Baz said, he seems impressive enough. I mean, he speaks well, and the philosophy seems to be there. It's sort of a more progressive style of play, the sort of things that have fared teams well in the Championship the last few years. There's obviously going to be doubts about him because he's probably the most inexperienced manager we've ever appointed in terms of the number of games he's managed and the competitions he's
apart from David Platt, which if you want to listen back in our archives to the What Makes a Forest Manager podcast that we did, but that's another story anyway.
Yeah, so it's going to be a steep learning curve for him in the Championship, and it's just whether the club and the fans will give him that time and the patience that he needs, because I think we've got all the ingredients there to do well. And he seems to have the ability to sort of implement his own philosophy on it. But it's just whether in the hurly-burly of the Championship, the people were very despondent last night after the game.
But it's a well-known fact, isn't it, that in this day and age, you win your first match of the season, you're going to win the league, and you lose your first match of the season, no matter how unfortunately, and you're going down. So that's just the way people are these days, isn't it?
Yeah, look at some of the results that happened on that Saturday. Barnsley beating relegated Fulham. Everyone's raving about Fulham. They're going to go straight back up. Brentford losing to Birmingham. Even Stoke at home under a new manager with real optimism. They lost to QPR. So there was some...
Mark Warburton's QPR, no less.
Yeah, so there were a few, if you want to call them, upsets. And examples where the teams haven't got off to the starts that they perhaps were expecting or wanting, but that's the Championship for you.
And every year we make the point about it's one of the tightest leagues in the world and one of the most competitive leagues in the world. This year even more so, because there's been such a high turnover of managers and the transfer market has been so... Forest have had one of the most conventional summer transfer windows of any team in the Championship, in the sense of there have been players in and players out. There's been a huge amount of inertia at a lot of other clubs, and then there will be a lot of scrabbling around, even more so than usual, in the next few days, I think. So, and Baz, on the new signings, I think. We've seen that the Portuguese midfielders are going to have to get used to life in the Championship. Do you think they've got the attributes to be able to do so?
Yeah, I think Semedo especially, he's impressed me. He looked a little bit lightweight in the Palace game, but he seems to have, from what I heard about the Sociedad game and certainly on yesterday's performance, he seems to have started to be getting to grips with it. Thiago Silva's obviously got a lot of skill. I think he's just going to be a little bit shell-shocked after yesterday. I'm impressed with both of them. It's just there's obviously a bit of acclimatisation they've got to get their heads around.
Okay, and with regards to up front, you're very much of the opinion, as am I, that Lewis Graben is missing João Carvalho.
Yes, absolutely. I think Carvalho and Graben is a fantastic partnership, because what Graben really wants are little through balls to run onto, so he can get his positioning right and then use his pace to run onto those balls. And Carvalho's the one who's going to give him that. Silva looks more like a bit of a runner with the ball more than a sort of spotting the hidden pass kind of player. So I think Graben, I thought he looked very frustrated until Rafa Mir came on.
Yeah.
He was left doing stuff that he didn't really want to do and feeding off scraps to some extent.
Yeah,
Rafa Mir, I was very, very impressed with him when he came on. He made a massive difference to how we played.
Very direct.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we needed that, because it gave us an outlet for ball.